once again, just in case you missed it or someone in your community expresses that they wanted to watch it, you can find this recording on YouTube. And for our Spanish-speaking families, si necesita ayuda en español, por favor, envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment@wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. Gracias. So tonight, this evening session will primarily focus on addressing crowding and the continued growth in your area, the Eastern Wake area. As a reminder, tonight's session was prepared by the Office of Student Assignment. And the information we'd like to review with you this evening is a subset of the full presentation that was shared with the board during their work session on September 2nd. There are several supplemental materials related to the development of this year's plan where we also shared with the board during their work session on September 2nd. And you can find these with the board materials for the September 2nd work session. Section 4B is a review of the information shared with the board during previous work sessions. Section 4C is an updated version of the Public Engagement Summary Report. In Section 4D, this includes PDF versions of the current draft of the proposed attendance boundary changes that allow you, the viewer, to zoom in to the street level and get a more intimate look. And Section 4E includes data reports used to inform projected enrollments for impacted schools. So you can access all of these materials and find additional resources by visiting the 2026 enrollment proposal page on our district website. Once again, this evening's session will focus on addressing the crowding and the continued growth in the Eastern Wake area. So before we begin, please let me go over some logistics. Our session will last for no more than an hour and a half. We will begin with a presentation and we will conclude, and we would like to spend a lot of our time responding to the questions that you submit to us tonight. We recognize that now and throughout the session, you're going to have many questions regarding the proposal or the recommended stability rules. So to capture your questions, we're going to be using a Q&A feature within Google Meet. To access this feature from a computer, please click on the grid shape in the toolbar currently on your screen. Now, if you're on a mobile device, just select the three dots and then select the icon with the three shapes, and that'll allow you to submit your questions. At this point, you should see a Q&A feature identified with a question mark icon. And to ensure your questions are anonymous, our host and moderators will be monitoring the Q&A throughout the evening, for questions and capturing them throughout this evening's session. So once you submit your question, then you see that your question has been removed from the Q&A. That means your question has been successfully captured by our moderators, and you do not need to submit that particular question again. You're obviously free to submit more questions, but once your original question is removed, that should tell you that that question has been logged and we're prepared to answer that. And we will make every effort to respond to your questions towards the end of our session. In addition, we will use your questions to update the FAQ portion of our website. Si necesita ayuda en español, por favor, envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment@wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. Gracias. In addition, we're asking tonight that you contribute to the larger community discussion related to this initial draft of the 26-27 school enrollment proposal via the Thought Exchange. Now, the Thought Exchange will remain open through October 5th, and you can post as many times as you wish. After it is closed, we will summarize all the feedback received, and we will share this summary with the board during their work session on October 21st. And just to let you know, no one will be personally identified in this summary, but your feedback will be used. So I encourage you to please submit. Now, before I have the opportunity to turn things over to Ms. Susan Pulliam, we'd like to remind you once again that tonight's session will focus on addressing the crowding and continued growth in Eastern Wake County. So our goals by the end of this evening is that you would have had the opportunity to first briefly review the assignment planning process, extensively review the recommendations included in the initial draft specific to your area of the district, also quickly review the timeline for the planning process, And perhaps most importantly, submit questions you have that'll help you gain a better understanding of the potential impacts of the proposed plan for your family. So without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Miss Susan Pulliam. Susan?
Thank you, Lewis, and thank you for welcoming all of our participants this evening. And for those of you that have joined us, thank you so much for giving us a portion of your precious time so that we can have an opportunity to share with you information about this year's enrollment plan. So just to remind you and provide some context, on September 2nd, staff members presented the initial draft of the 2026-2027 school enrollment plan to our Board of Education during a work session. The draft does include proposed school assignment changes for the 26-27 school year. So that's the upcoming school year, not this one, but the very next one. Specifically, this year's student assignment plan focuses on the opening of a new elementary school in the Fuquay-Varina area called Hilltop Needmore Elementary, as well as aligning feeder patterns in some areas that were impacted by recent elementary school changes and relieving capped and overcrowded schools while filling underutilized schools. And that's primarily what's bringing us together this evening. Many of these changes will allow students to attend a less crowded school, and several of them will even allow families to have a shorter bus route to school. The proposal also includes stability rules to help families impacted by the plan have an opportunity to perhaps stay at their current school and having newer families go to the new school assignment. All of the information that we will share during this evening session, along with a whole bunch of other tools and resources that might be helpful to you, can be found on our 2026 enrollment plan website on our district. This is a time-limited website, meaning it'll only remain open during this portion of the planning process through the approval. Once the board does approve a final plan for 26-27, all the information you're looking for would be found on the assignment planning page. The main assignment planning page that I highlighted here on the lower half of your screen is a great resource for those of you that are interested in the planning process, the process that led up to the development of the recommendations that are included in this year's plan. We recognize that some of you may just now be joining us and might have missed our host's instructions on how to submit questions. So we will be using the Q&A feature here in the Google Meet. If you're using a laptop or a computer, please look for the grid shape on your toolbar and then look for this question mark tool, this question mark icon. If you're using a mobile device, you're going to look for these three dots, then a shape. It's I think a triangle, a circle, and a square together, a three shape icon, and then you'll find that question mark icon. We will want you to post all of your questions anonymously. We want to keep your information secure. So once you see that your question has been removed from the Q&A tool, that lets you know that our host and moderators have successfully captured that question, and we'll address that question later in tonight's session. We will make every effort to respond to all of your questions, and I'll try to get through this portion of the presentation as quickly as I can so we can get to those questions quickly. We also want to continue to encourage everyone to participate in the thought exchange. Again, if you're just now joining us, you might have missed that reminder. That thought exchange will remain open through October 5th. What's great about the thought exchange is not only are you able to post your thoughts, questions, concerns, ideas, appreciations, the board can see every single comment that's posted. So that allows our board to have full transparency into what the public is sharing. It allows our planning team to have full transparency into what everyone is sharing. In addition, it allows us to keep all of those comments in one location, so it makes it much easier to analyze, summarize, and prepare reviews for our board. All of the information that's shared through this thought exchange and through information sessions like tonight will be captured, summarized, and reported out to the Board of Education during their work session on October 21st. To ensure you have a better understanding of how this year's proposal was developed, we will take a few moments just to briefly go through our planning process. A much more detailed review can be found by looking at the materials posted here or by going to our assignment planning website. But before we begin, we always want to remind everybody that there is a board policy that sort of guides the development of the enrollment plan. It is Board Policy 4150, and this policy directs staff when developing assignment recommendations to balance, to the extent reasonable, the goals and factors identified by four main pillars. These are student achievement, stability, proximity, and operational efficiency. Each of these pillars have very specific definitions outlined within Policy 4150. And again, just to make sure that everyone is on the same level footing, we're going to briefly show you a video that talks a little bit more about this policy, and then we'll rejoin our presentation.
Understanding student assignment. It's no secret that our school district is growing, and it's growing fast. That means each year we need to address overcrowded schools and often need to open new schools to keep up with this growth. To state the obvious, we may have to reduce the enrollment at an existing school or fill new schools with students. This is done through the annual student assignment process. To best understand when and where new growth is coming in our district, we conduct an annual enrollment forecast. This forecast helps us look ahead up to 10 years and project enrollment growth throughout the district. This information helps us update our capital improvement plan and to make more informed decisions related to school assignments. Each year, some students are assigned to one of our new schools or reassigned to an existing school. This ensures we have balanced school populations across the district. We know families love their schools and that student assignment decisions can be worrisome. That's why we want to be completely transparent in how we make them. Our school board has established 4 pillars that guide each and every student assignment decision. Here's what they mean and how they work together. Student achievement. We want all of our schools to provide the best academic opportunities for our students. This pillar compels us to think about whether a student assignment plan can help reduce high concentrations of poverty or low-performing students at some of our schools. Stability. Essentially, we try to keep as many children at their current school through the exit grade as possible. When reassignments are necessary, we provide the opportunity for some students to submit a stability transfer request and stay at their current school through the exit grade. Operational efficiency. This pillar is about making sure all of our schools and transportation resources are at their best use. Overcrowded schools are a problem. Classrooms packed with too many students are one thing. But then there are the endless carpool lines, bathroom facilities that can't comfortably accommodate everyone, and having to start lunch when most people are still working on breakfast. On the flip side, having under-enrolled schools is an inefficient use of public resources, particularly when there are crowded schools nearby. Proximity. Okay, this one can be a little tricky. In a perfect world, houses would be built in neat little rows on a predictable timeline and at a slow and steady rate. As it is, we live in an imperfect world where lots and lots of homes pop up in one area, while growth is slight or non-existent in others. For this reason, it is impossible to send every child to their most proximate school unless we want some of our schools bursting at the seams while others are half empty. That said, this pillar states that we will send students to schools within a reasonable distance. Often, the difference between the most proximate school and the next most proximate school is no more than a couple of miles. Please remember that we must consider all 4 of these pillars when making assignment decisions. There is no priority among the 4 that applies in every situation. It's a balancing act that ultimately helps us come up with the best possible plan for everyone. Thank you for working with us to ensure our school system continues to serve all students well.
We hope that video was helpful and shared with you a little bit more context about how the policy directs staff. And then we also just wanted to let you know that that video, along with all the other resources we're sharing with you tonight and others, are all on our district website. In addition to the policy guidance that we're given by 4150, we do follow a planning cycle that involves essentially 6 core steps. And we are currently active in that 4th step of the process, as you can see on this image. The first step in that process is our annual enrollment membership forecast. What this forecast does is provide both a 1-year outlook for student membership as well as a 10-year forecast and sort of all the years in between, candidly. It is updated annually so that we can account for any changes in residential development patterns, maybe home sales, birth rates, any employment changes that could potentially impact our projected number of students for the district. And so even though we get that 10-year forecast, we still do update it every year. For more information about this process, again, refer to those more detailed reports that were provided to the board at their September 2nd work session. One thing to keep in mind is that simply knowing how many students we have to serve helpful, but knowing where those students are going to be located throughout the district over time is extremely helpful when developing assignment plans and also working on our capital improvement plan. So what you see here is hopefully an acknowledgement that it's not evenly distributed throughout the district. Some areas are stabilizing, even showing maybe a slight decrease in total student enrollment, where other areas are growing at a really rapid rate. Eastern Wake is a perfect example. As you can see highlighted here, almost every area within this region is projected to have rapid growth over the next 10 years. The next step in the process then is to take that 1 year forecast and use it to help us project our crowding for the coming school year. So that 1 year projection is used for determining funding needs for the district, as well as for things like our annual enrollment forecast. And so what you're seeing here are the numbers that were shared with the board in March of 2025, and they were the projected enrollment numbers for this current school year. We'll update all of this information once we get through the official headcount period for the current school year, and that's usually shared with the board in late November, early December. And again, I've highlighted the area that we'll be talking about in this particular session so that you can see the relative crowding at the elementary, middle, and high school levels in this region. The third step in the process then is to review what's going on with our capital improvement plan and whether or not there have been any adjustments or date shifts for any of the projects in that plan. In the map toward the top of your screen, you'll see the general locations of the new schools that opened this year already highlighted for you with green circles. There are 3 new elementary schools and 1 new high school that opened this school year. In this same map at the top of the screen, you'll see an orange circle that just popped up. That's the location of the new Hilltop Needmore Elementary School in the Fuquay Arena area. And that one is scheduled to open for new students in 2026-27. And that is included in this year's enrollment plan. The darker gray circles that you see on the rest of the map represent those schools that are going to be newly constructed over the next several years as part of this current 7-year capital improvement plan. And I've highlighted for you 2 locations in the eastern part of the district that will impact this area over time. The first one here represents the location of Marshburn Road Elementary, which was recently approved by the board for that name and is scheduled to open at the end years of our 7-year plan. So something along the lines of 2030, we'll be able to have new students attending that new school. You'll also see the second arrow identifying a school called Little Creek Elementary Road. You don't see a circle around it. The board has approved a name for that school, and we've already secured the land for that school. It just hasn't been funded yet in the capital improvement plan, but we do expect it to be funded in the next cycle. So again, we're still looking at the 2030s, 31, 32 before that school might open. So we've got a little while. We've got crowding that's coming before those schools are going to open. In addition, on the lower portion of the screen, you can see other schools that are expected to have major renovations. And when I say major renovations, kind of keep in your mind something along the lines of a tear down rebuild, almost if not a completely brand new structure, close to a completely brand new structure for these schools. The one highlighted in orange is Swift Creek Elementary. That's the only major renovation project that's scheduled to be complete for the 26-27 school year. But I do want to draw your attention to 3 schools that Lockhart's already underway. Wendell Elementary will be coming soon, and Zebulon Middle will also all be projected to have major renovation projects in the next 6 to 7 years. Before I go too much further, I do want to talk about all those construction projects. Please do keep in mind that the dates for those projects could potentially slip out, be extended a little bit into the future if there are any changes like market volatility, design schedule changes, any other types of construction issues that might delay the project. So it's always possible that those projects could open a little bit later or complete a little bit later than we're initially projecting now, because some of those plans are, as I said, 6 or 7 years into the future. So there's always an opportunity that perhaps one of those schedules could shift. But we continue to monitor that process and that progress so that each of our annual enrollment plans takes into account the best possible information related to the timing of those projects. Once that forecast is complete, we've done the crowding analysis, and we've looked at the capital improvement planning updates, we're ready to go ahead and dive into the development of the enrollment plan for the coming school year. So we are currently actively in that step. And as part of that step, we did public engagement in the spring where we went around the community, had a couple of in-person sessions, had some online thought exchanges, and just engaged the community in discussions about what we should be knowing and what we should think about and understand about the unique perspectives in each of these communities that are being impacted by either school openings, major renovations, or in your case, severe and rapid onset of crowding. So in that time period between March all the way through late July, we had this level of participation. This was shared with our board. You can see a quick look at that total participation across all of those opportunities. Again, these were all held within the first few months of this year, 2025. And for some of these areas, particularly if a new school is opening, those conversations might have started 1 or 2 years ago. But this just shows the participation since in this 2025 calendar year. The plus numbers that you see off to the side are just a quick indication of how many additional participants participated in these events between our June presentation to the board and the numbers that you see here with the date of August 25th. So just a clerical note there. Again, for all of this information, please go watch the September 2nd presentation to the board during the work session if you want more information about this, or reference those online materials that Lewis shared with you at the opening of our session. Now, specific to the impacts related to enrollment growth and crowding in the Eastern area, we hosted an in-person session this year in March, as you can see at the top of the slide, and we hosted a thought exchange during that same time period to gain a better understanding of the unique perspectives and needs of these families. While we didn't have extremely high participation in our in-person session, we really did have a good turnout on that thought exchange, and so we were able to gain a lot of insight into what's important for members of this community when thinking about how to manage all of the growth that's already coming to this area, as well as the growth that's projected to continue in the next several years. For a complete summary of all the thoughts and ideas that were captured from families and community members during these public engagement sessions, please review the updated public engagement summary that was shared with the board during their work session on September 2nd. So as you can imagine, many thoughts and ideas were generated across all of these different participation opportunities, these engagement opportunities, and the sessions that we held. And taking all of those into consideration, the planning team identified 5 core or 6 core areas of 5 core areas of emphasis as we were developing the 26-27 plan. The first is continuing to identify ways to provide stability of assignment for students and families. It is loud and clear, most families do not want their students to change schools. So wherever we can find that stability, the planning team is working hard to make that possible. Working to provide K-8 calendar continuity. That's another thing that the planning team heard loud and clear across all regions of the district, that making sure that if the K-8 students in a family can either all be on traditional or all be on multi-track year-round or all on track 4, that would be really, really helpful for families to have that calendar alignment. Similarly, we're hearing from most areas of the county that a K-12 feeder pattern or cohort alignment is critical for their families, so that as their students are transitioning from 5th to 6th grade or 8th to 9th grade, there's a large group of students that they're familiar with as they make those transitions into those new school spaces. And so the planning team has been evaluating and taking that into consideration throughout the planning process. Acknowledging the unique regional concerns when developing capacity management recommendations. So those are all different. I will say that's where it's different. In some regions, using something like multi-track year-round to add capacity is a welcomed idea. In other areas, that's just very difficult to manage for all kinds of reasons. When looking at other options like trailers or capital improvement projects, those all are different things that could potentially be used in various areas of the county. So just taking into consideration those unique perspectives. And then of course, balancing the desire for proximity and stability that families are sharing with us with the district's needs to maintain the board student achievement and operational efficiency goals. So once that happens, we also meet with the board. This year it was in May to have a clarifying discussion about what they felt needed to be included in the plan to make sure staff had a clear indication. So other than the opening of the brand new school, we were asked to align middle school and high school feeder patterns for those same families to address any domino or cascading impacts in those areas, so that students if a school was under enrolled as a result of sending students to a new school, that perhaps it could be backfilled from students at a nearby overcrowded school. You can see here, determine whether or not any of those renovation projects we talked about would be adding enough capacity to warrant assignment changes. Looking at crowding, and that's, again, what brings us together here in the Eastern region. So those additional items we were asked to review were to address crowded schools, cap schools in some areas, reduce transportation inefficiencies wherever possible. And then finally, we were specifically asked to address some lingering issues based on last year's plan, the one that took effect for the 25-26 school year, related to calendar and feeder pattern alignment for families. So that then brings the team into the development phase, and the planning team did take all of that into consideration when developing the recommendations for the 26-27 plan that you've seen and hopefully had a chance to review, and that we'll talk about some very specific elements tonight. So these recommendations do address all of those key factors that were outlined in those May work sessions, along with all of the input that's been collected from families and community members along the way. So before we dive into those recommendations, just really quick, there's 2 additional steps in our planning process that follow. So once the board approves the plan, usually in late November, or mid to late November, then we can determine, all right, what is successfully going to improve things for some of our capped and crowded schools, what is not. And that's when we'll have a capped schools conversation. What you see here is a list of approved capped schools across the district that was approved in February of this year. And the one that's highlighted in green, Beaver Dam Elementary, is the closest one to your area in this eastern area that is capped. So it is one of our capped schools, is actually Beaver Dam. Riverbend's kind of close, but it's in it's a little bit more northwest of this region. But that one is also, as you can see on the list as well, Riverbend Elementary. We also then follow that up with, are there any schools that are crowded, that are not currently operating on a multi-track year-round campus, that calendar that could potentially benefit from that? And so this year, that conversation led to the changing of the calendar for Lake Myra Elementary from a single track year-round school to a multi-track year-round school. That'll give the school an additional approximately 200 seats to help address all of the continued growth and crowding in the base attendance area for that school. All of the information that was just shared on that 6-step planning process can be found on our assignment planning website. And so I'm going to just keep rolling because I know we want to get to our questions. So the other thing going on is that if you have just joined us, or if you joined us in the last 5 or 10 minutes, you might not have heard the instructions. I do see that some people have found the tool and are posting questions. So that's awesome. Please continue to do that throughout the presentation. But if you'll find that Q&A feature here in the Google Meet itself, post your question. Our moderators are monitoring that throughout the session. They'll grab that question, they'll copy and paste it so that we can capture that question. And as soon as I get done talking, we'll start answering all of those questions. All right, the other thing is our thought exchange. It's open. It'll remain open through October 5th. And this is a really awesome tool for getting information to our board. I do hear sometimes about there's a character limit. It's not an official public comment tool in the sense that you're not uploading documents, you're not putting petitions in here. It's not that type of public comment. It's about having discussion with your community. So I would really encourage you to think of it like sticky notes. Try to put a single thought on each instance. You can post as many individual thoughts as you'd like. So if you have a thought about special education, and maybe a thought about transportation, or perhaps a thought about crowding, or a thought about stability, try to put those in as individual thoughts, and then that'll give you that character freedom to be able to talk in more depth about those particular items. All right, so let's jump in. The initial staff recommendations for the 26-27 school enrollment plan cover a myriad of topics, specifically opening of Hilltop Needmore Elementary, aligning feeder patterns based on assignment changes from last year, and addressing crowding and enrollment growth across the district. So there's 3 core areas, and we're going to spend our time tonight just talking about the eastern area. If you're from a different portion of the county and you want to see and hear that presentation, the recordings of those original sessions have already been posted to our website. So if you are here from a different region, perhaps the west or the south, the Hilltop Needmore group, or perhaps those that are in the Apex area, there are recordings of those sessions if you want to hear that detailed run through of those changes. But we'll certainly take any of your questions later tonight if you're from one of those other areas as well, because this is our last session for this period, for this group. All the information on this year's enrollment proposal is here. And then of course, all the information on the planning process is here. Before we get into the specifics for the eastern part of the county, I just want to give you a brief overview, and I'm talking super high level overview of all of the things that are included in this year's plan is particular to the base assignment changes. So at the elementary level, you can see there's a cluster of changes right here in this region. All of those are related to the opening of Hilltop Needmore Elementary. There's a whole information session that we've already recorded and posted that talks through those changes. The recommendations you see over here in the Apex area are related to crowding and enrollment growth. And again, there's an entirely separate session that walks through those. Tonight, we're going to spend our time talking about the changes that are recommended in the eastern area, specifically as it relates to Zebulon Elementary and Carver Elementary. At the middle school level, all of the changes at the middle school level are for feeder pattern alignment. So the changes you see here are related to the opening of Hilltop Needmore. The changes that you see here are either related to that crowded elementary recommendation in the west or that feeder pattern alignment from the 25-26 plan that needed to be adjusted. And then you can see over here a single recommendation related to the Zebulon Elementary Carver change to get feeder pattern alignment for those families. And at the high school level, again, very minimal. These are specifically related to the opening of Hilltop Needmore, and these are specifically related to the feeder pattern alignment carry forward from the current 25-26 plan that was recently approved. Stability rules. We find that the vast majority of our questions for families are really about how does this impact me? So if the plan gets approved as written and the board moves forward with all of the recommendations that have been presented, what does that mean for me and my family? So for me and my family, that means that you will have options for what is called a stability transfer. So for the 26-27 enrollment plan, staff is recommending that the board adopt the following stability transfer rules. The ones you see on this page are specifically related to families who are being proposed, their address is being changed to be assigned to the new Hilltop Needmore Elementary. This does not impact families in the eastern area. These are slightly more restrictive rules, and they do not apply to the recommendations we're going to talk about tonight, but I wanted you to be able to see that those rules are slightly different when we're opening a new school, because those could pertain to this region in the future, particularly as we open schools like Marshburn Road or Little Creek Elementary, a few years from now. But these are the ones we want to look at, the ones that are tagged README. So in this area, we have some elementary changes that are being proposed from Zebulon Elementary to Carver Elementary. Both of those are existing elementary schools with existing school populations. We don't need to rapidly fill either school so that we can, hire staff and open a school the way we would for Hilltop Needmore, the new elementary school in Fuquay-Varina. So in order to provide the most stability, to be responsive to that call from the community, to provide the most stability for families possible, any student that is currently attending Zebulon Elementary that lives in this attendance area that's being proposed to be assigned to Carver Elementary would be eligible for a transfer to stay at Zebulon Elementary through the end of the 5th grade. So I'll say that again. If you have a student that's a current kindergarten through 4th grader that lives in the area that's proposed to be assigned from Zebulon Elementary to Carver, and you'd like for them to stay at Zebulon Elementary, you have that option. In addition, if you have a kindergartner at home or a student at home that's going to be a kindergartner for the 26-27 school year, that student would also be eligible to join their older sibling and stay at Zebulon Elementary. The only compromise we have to make in order to allow for such generous transfer rules is that there would be no district provided transportation. So that's the only thing that makes it not super sweet, right? Is that we can provide that stability transfer, but unfortunately the district just can't maintain that extra transportation. Those buses will now need to be serving Carver Elementary. And so any buses coming into those neighborhoods would be serving Carver. The other thing to keep in mind is that those requests would need to be submitted during the designated stability transfer window, and we will send all kinds of information to impacted families as we get closer to the final approval date, as well as once the plan is officially approved to help them access that stability transfer window. Keep in mind, it'll be in the fall before we leave for winter break. I can't give you specific dates yet. We'll be able to do that closer to November. But it'll be something like late November, early December, so that you can get those submitted, get your response back. They're guaranteed to be approved if you submit them during that window. If for some reason you miss that window and you wait until the general transfer window in March, we can't make that same guarantee because Zebulon Elementary might not have any more available seats for your student at that time. So the only time we can guarantee those stability transfers is during the stability transfer window. This area is also impacted by middle school changes because if you're going to go from Zebulon Elementary to Carver Elementary, then it would make sense that those students move on to Wendell Middle. There are no other students that go Carver Elementary, Zebulon Elementary. That would create a very fragmented cohort for those students. So we are having I don't know what you would call it, a cascading or a follow-on or a complementary assignment recommendation that some students from Zebulon Middle be assigned to Wendell Middle so that they can have that K-8 feeder pattern alignment. All the students in this region are already assigned to East Wake High School, so there's no high school change recommended in this area. Again, very generous stability rules. Any current 6th or 7th grader who would be rising into 7th or 8th grade next year would be eligible to stay at Zebulon Middle as long as they can provide their own transportation. In addition, if you have a rising 6th grade sibling that would like to join you, they're more than welcome to do so. You just need to put those requests in during the stability transfer window. And while we're here, I'll make sort of my public service announcement. If you're not quite sure if you can provide the transportation, but you really want a chance to have your kid stay at their current school, either Zebulon Elementary or Zebulon Middle, go ahead and put in that transfer in the stability window so we can make sure you have it and it's locked in and we can guarantee that approval. And then as we get closer to the general transfer window in March, if at that point you've had conversations with your family or your community members or your peers, your friends, and you've realized we're not going to be able to make carpool work, or, a big chunk of families went ahead and went to the new school assignment, then you can just put in what's called as a back to base transfer. And we can approve those during that March transfer window with no question. And then that way you could go to Carver and go to Wendell with transportation if that's what you need. So if you're not quite sure, go ahead and ask for that transfer during the stability transfer window because we can lock it in, we can guarantee it. And then if you change your mind, it's easier to change back to base than it is to try to give you, particularly at Zebulon Elementary, to give you that seat back later in the process. And I'm sure we'll have some questions about that specifically. So Lewis, I'm counting on you to keep me honest to make sure we answer all those questions. In this area, we don't have any high school recommendations, but I did just want you to see what those high school rules would look like for those families in the southern area that are being impacted by that domino effect for the Hilltop Needmore Elementary School, as well as some Apex area families. All right, again, if you've got questions, keep posting those. We're excited to get to those. That's the best part of these presentations because we get to really personalize the presentation and answer the questions that you've posted. And before I do that, I just want to talk about the actual recommendations for this area. So just let's talk through the map a little bit. So first, what you're going to see on the left here is that highlighted region that shows we already have overcrowding at Zebulon Elementary, Wake Lawn Elementary, Lake Myra Elementary. We're getting super close to having overcrowding at Wendell Elementary and Forestville Elementary. We have a little bit of room at Carver Elementary, and we have some room at Lockhart. However, it's undergoing a reconstruction, so now is not the time to add students to the school. In addition, you can see that this is one of those areas where we're projected to have steady increases in overall student enrollment over the next 5 to 10 years. You're already feeling it. Some of you that live in this area, you see the houses going up, you see the houses filling. It's right. You can see all of this movement happening in the eastern portion of the county. So you can see the kids coming. So we do need to be prepared for those. And since the opening of Marshburn Road Elementary is still a couple of years out and Little Creek Elementary's campus hasn't been officially programmed and funded yet, we really feel like we need to take some action to provide a little bit of relief to Zebulon Elementary. So in this year's recommendations, we're recommending that this portion of the current Zebulon Elementary attendance area that you see highlighted on the left of your screen become part of the Carver Elementary base attendance area. It allows it to become part of this portion of the Carver base. As you can see, there's already a piece that's currently assigned to Carver. So it just extends that down in this region. This is that area where like there's Lions Club, the pool, the swimming pool that's out that way. I'm gonna mess it up. I think this is either 1010 or something like that, but that's that road right here where a lot of these families really truly feel like they're in Wendell proper, all the way up to Little Creek. And so that portion is being recommended to become part of the Carver Elementary base to expand the Carver Elementary base attendance area and provide a little bit of relief to Zebulon Elementary. The future Marshburn Road Elementary is kind of in this general region, and the future Little Creek is in this general region. So do know that those schools are coming, but they're just not coming fast enough for the growth that's already here. What you can see here is both schools, Carver and Zebulon, are experiencing high rates of growth. They have limited capacity. However, knowing that Marshburn Road is coming and will ultimately take a portion of the Carver base away, the idea is to go ahead and take a little bit out of Zebulon Elementary, put it into Carver, and it's an area that we know would stay at Carver, so that once Marshburn Road opens and that reduces Carver's attendance area by a chunk, Carver's already been backfilled a little bit. So you can see that the crowding differences between the two schools, it's just an indication of that rapid growth. And we're prepared to support the principals and the staff at the schools in managing that total enrollment over these next couple of years. Then at the same point, listening to that K-8 and K-12 feeder pattern continuity concern that families have been sharing, this recommendation is strictly being made so that there'll be feeder pattern alignment for these students. All of Carver Elementary currently progresses to Wendell Middle, so this would allow that same exact area to be assigned to Wendell Middle for that K-8 or K-12 feeder pattern alignment. This is not being done based on capacity utilization. Both of these schools have sufficient space today. The growth is coming and we'll fill them up really quickly. But that's why this is being recommended. So you can see here, there's not a huge need to relieve crowding at either one of these schools, but both are projected to have a decent amount of enrollment growth over the next several years. Again, if you've got questions, please post them here. And then we'll talk quickly about calendar application changes. This doesn't impact this area in a tremendous way, but you'll notice that currently students at Zebulon Elementary have the ability to apply to Carver because it's considered a quasi year-round school to get a year-round calendar. Well, if that same area is now going to be base assigned at Carver, it doesn't need a year-round option anymore. And so we're just recommending that we remove that. It sounds like logical with, of course, that would happen, but we do have to officially have the board approve that since it is considered an assignment change. However, any student from that area that's currently attending Carver would just continue to attend Carver, but instead of through the calendar application, they would be attending as base. At the elementary level, there's also a handful of schools that you'll notice have more than one calendar application option for their address. And in this case, students at Hodge Road Elementary currently see both Forestville Road Elementary and Knightdale Elementary for traditional calendar, which means there's 3 buses going into that neighborhood to take kids to 3 different schools just for that base or that traditional calendar. In addition, in this area, it's not very popular. Hardly any students are using this option. So in order to increase our transportation efficiency, which is sort of the reason for the ones on this slide, we're recommending that we just simply remove it since there's truly less than 5 students total that are taking advantage of this. And that's a lot of bus service for very few students. So we feel it would be better used to support either Hodge or other schools in the area. At the middle school level, you don't have any of those same concerns, so there are none in this region. And again, if you're interested in looking at any of those in greater detail, please continue to visit our website, watch the recording of the board presentation, or watch the previous recordings for the other regions if you're here not representing Eastern Wake, but maybe a different portion of the county. All right, I think I'm getting close, Lewis. Keep posting those questions. But before I hand things over to Lewis, I do want to have just a quick moment to tell you where we are in the planning process so you kind of know what your next steps are. We've had all of this, what I talked about earlier, all of this stuff has happened leading up into that presentation that was given to the board on September 2nd. So that's now a couple of weeks in our rearview mirror, but that is the most recent action we've had with the board. The next time we'll go to the board will be October 21st, and 2 things will happen on that evening. First, in the afternoon, we'll take a summary of all the information we've collected since September 2nd from families and community members, principals, anyone who had any comments, questions, or concerns about the enrollment proposal. We'll take a summary of all of those comments to the board during their work session on October 21st, and we'll respond to as many of those as we possibly can, as to why we can or cannot accommodate those requests. If there are any revisions to the original draft, those will also be presented at that time. Later that same evening, the board will hold their official public hearing as part of their regularly called board meeting, and you'll be able to get sign up instructions for that much closer to the day. If it's something that's important to you that you feel like you need to come to the school board and either say, please approve this because this is really good for our families, or please keep these things in mind when you're making the decision because we have concerns about how this might impact our family or our community. So there's a couple of ways you can think about your public comment. Then later in November, we'll take all of the information that was gathered during the public hearing and a second round of information sessions to the board. We'll take a final draft of the enrollment plan to the board on November 18th for review and approval. That way families can know the impacts of those changes as quickly as possible, and then we can start contacting those of you that are directly impacted with information about the stability transfer process. So what are we doing now? We presented to the board on September 2nd. We launched our website. We opened our thought exchange. We're now hosting information sessions. This is the last of our virtual information sessions. And so please continue to ask your questions tonight. This is being recorded. We'll post it to our website for anybody who wants to watch it again, or if a community member or a friend couldn't join us tonight and you want to share with them this information. And then on September 24th, we will have an open house that'll be hosted at Hilltop Needmore Elementary. Lewis, did you need to break in?
No, not at this time.
Okay. So on September 24th from 6 to 8 p.m., we will be hosting an open house. It is going to be at Hilltop Needmore Elementary. And for this region, I realize that might be a little bit of a distance, but we can only host one a year. And since most of the families impacted by the plan are going to be in that region, we just thought it made sense to host it there. But you are more than welcome to join us. We're going to have representatives from transportation, child nutrition services, academics, special education. So if any questions about supporting your student as they transition from one school to the next, all of those types of staff will be there. In addition, we're trying to encourage our principals from the region to be there as well, so that if you have questions about what the school is like, you can ask them. I also encourage you to reach directly out to, let's say, Corver Elementary or Wendell Middle. They are prepared to maybe give a tour, perhaps an information session, if you're just curious to know a little bit more about those schools. Again, this is how we're capturing our questions tonight, and I did see that several are being popped in throughout tonight's session, so I'm excited to get to those. And I'm now going to turn things back over to Lewis so we can get to your questions, and I'm going to get a drink of water. Thank you again so much, and hopefully the information was helpful and helped prepare for our question and answer period.
Thank you very much, Susan. Good job. So folks, once again, I just want to thank you for coming out and sharing your evening with us. We know that we reviewed a lot of information, and we want to address as many of your questions as possible. So if you haven't, or you have other ideas or questions you want to post, please take a few moments, post any of those questions or comments using the Q&A feature that's up on the screen now. As you continue to post your questions, we intend to start addressing some of the questions that have already been submitted during this session. So I'll ask a couple of questions to Susan. I'll give her the opportunity to use her expertise to answer those questions. And as she's answering those questions, we will continue to take your questions, record them, and get them ready so Susan can do her best to answer them for you. Okay? And Susan,
All right.
put you.
I've had some sips of water. I'm ready. Oh, we lost you, Lewis.
I'm back. You ready? You got your drink of water? All right.
I did. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Susan, last year, we were able as a family to apply to a magnet elementary school like Washington and Fuller. This year, it's not found on the magnet school list. Why is it not showing up for my address? In that case, how do I apply for magnet schools if my zip code is 27545?
Okay, so a couple of things. Schools that are duplicated. So this isn't specific to the assignment plan for those of you that are watching with questions. This is just some general information about how our magnet program works. But in our magnet program, particularly at the elementary level, we duplicate programs. So the program at Zebulon Elementary is the same program that's at, let's say, Fuller, Washington, Hunter, and a couple others. It's the GT program. So if there's a GT program that's either your base school or is the application school for your area. So the Eastern Wake area, then that would be the one that would show and the others would not. So not everybody in the district sees Washington, not everybody in the district sees Hunter, not everybody in the district sees Zebulon Elementary. So you're only going to see one GT option as your application option for your address. So during the magnet period, you'll be able to apply to those that are designated application options for your area. If you're interested in other magnet schools that aren't on your list because it's a duplicate program, you can technically ask for those during the transfer period. I just caution you that most of these programs are highly popular and the number of available seats are going to be limited. So it is best for you to really try to find a match with those that are on your list, because those will be the ones you have the highest priority for selection.
Thank you, Susan. I have another process question for you.
Sure.
So the proposal and all the information you just shared with us, has the board already made up their mind about this with respect to the changes that you discussed?
No. So in September, when staff presents the initial set of recommendations, that's the board's first opportunity to see them, just as it is the community's first opportunity to see them. So right now, they've asked us as staff to go out and collect feedback from the community about what it looks good, what questions they might have, what would help a family to better understand how it might potentially impact them. And then we'll bring all that information back to the board on October 21st. At that time, we have a little bit more robust conversation. If staff feels like there are revisions that should be recommended based on all the feedback that's collected, we'll propose those ourselves. But if from an operational efficiency or board policy standpoint, there aren't, we won't necessarily make a lot of revision recommendations, to put it candidly, as staff, because we've put a lot of hard work into developing the first set of recommendations. But if at that point the board feels compelled to direct staff to make changes, they certainly are able to do that. Also, after the public hearing on October 21st, they can continue to provide guidance to staff. By the time we get to the November presentation, that's pretty clear that that's the plan that the board is most likely to approve. However, even last year at the board table, staff had recommended in a particular case that one of the elementary schools open up as multi-track year-round, and the board overturned that recommendation and opened it as traditional. So it is possible for last-minute changes, if you will, but it generally speaking, between the October meeting and the November meeting, that's when it's a little bit more firmed up.
Thanks very much, Susan. I have a couple of stability rule questions I'd like to pose. So, Susan, last time that we were in a public meeting in person, we were told the current students would be given an option to stay in the same school, but they will lose transportation. Is this still the same?
Yes. So I'll go back. Pardon my rapid clicking. We'll start here with the other elementary school changes. So because the Eastern area specifically is making recommendations from Zebulon Elementary to Carver Elementary, those are existing schools. All current students, and when I say current, they have to be attending the school, not just living in the base area, right? So if a student is attending Zebulon Elementary now, and is a current kindergarten through fourth grader, and they would like to stay, they absolutely will be given the opportunity to do so. They just need to submit the official request. Staff will approve it. It's guaranteed as long as they're submitted during that stability window. Those dates are going to be roughly end of November, beginning of December. We'll get you specific dates a little bit closer to the approval time in November. In addition, staff and your current school principal will all be bombarding you with reminders and messages if you are specifically impacted by these changes, to help encourage you to put those transfers in. We're not going to let you miss it or forget it.
Thank you, Susan. So, Susan, this is a question that we get quite often, and it's a good question. Why aren't new residents to the area, new communities, new homes being built, new established communities, why aren't they assigned to schools that are underutilized? Wouldn't that cause less of a disruption to the students who are currently attending Wake County Public Schools?
So this is a both and. So these stability rules really address that core concern. If you're an existing student who's already attending the school, you have the stability rules in your back pocket to help you maintain your school assignment. So even in your own community, the newest residents would have to be assigned to the new school if things were approved as currently drafted. In addition, most of the recommendations you're seeing us make over these last couple of years that aren't directly related to the opening of a new school are to relieve current crowding and simply moving a new community that has yet to build out won't provide any relief now. So for schools that need relief now, they're already capped. They're so close and they're overcrowding to needing to be capped because they can't squeeze one more student into their classrooms. They need immediate relief of enrollment to be able to adequately and appropriately serve their current population of students. So we can't rely solely on taking the new construction and having that go to a new school. Oftentimes we have to do either a mixture or do that immediate relief with current residents. So it's a combination of both.
Thank you, Susan.
Mhm.
So Susan, this is a similar question, but I just want to ask it on behalf of
Sure,
this family.
absolutely.
So the stability option does not provide transportation. We just want you to know that that severely disrupts the daily schedule of people going to the office who, it also provides a financial burden. Does the board understand this? And is there any possibility that they would consider providing transportation along with the stability option?
Okay. So to answer the first part of the question, absolutely, the board is keenly aware of how this impacts families, as is staff and the planning team. Everyone understands that the best situation is keeping your school assignment and keeping your current level of district provided transportation. And when that's possible, we do that. It may not feel like relief for families that are currently in the plan with an address that's projected to change, but there are very few families impacted by the enrollment plan this year. The vast majority of our 160,000 students are going to be able to have that stability. And while that's not reassuring for the person who's being reassigned and it's impacting their family immediately, please know that the planning team works really, really hard to minimize the total number of students impacted by any change because of that very reason. When it comes to the transportation piece, there was a time period pre-COVID when we had a lot of bus drivers and we had adequate funding and staff to be able to have additional routes. And so we might have been able to provide that type of transportation for perhaps fifth grade students, but that time has just changed. We don't have the financial or staff resources to really pull that off anymore. And so the board we can't give a disingenuous promise. If we were to say that we would try to provide transportation, it wouldn't work. Your student's route would be really long. It would be unpredictable because there's just not enough resources to go around to have routes coming from one neighborhood to two different school assignments. And so the compromise is super generous stability rules. All students can stay. However, the district simply can't provide that transportation. However, the planning team also feels that the earlier we make these announcements to families gives you more and more time to see if there's a way you could possibly figure out carpool.
Great. Thanks, Susan. Once again, folks, please continue to post your questions so that we can do our best to provide you as much information as possible. I said I was going to leave the stability space, but I'm not. I got one more stability question. The current stability plan states that my child can stay at his or her current school until the finish of fifth grade. Is there any possibility that this will be changed or adjusted in the future once it is implemented?
Oh, no. That's a great question. Once the board adopts rules for a particular assignment plan, they're valid for those changes, carte blanche. So the board will not go back and change those rules. Is it legally within their purview to do so? Probably. They will not. The board has never done that, particularly since there's no transportation involved.
Okay, Susan, you addressed 2627 with respect to having a sibling that's a rising kindergartner. What about if I have a child who has a sibling that's rising up into kindergarten in the 27-28 school year? Are they still eligible for stability rules?
Thank you for presenting that question. So there is a tiny distinction between stability transfers and regular transfers. Stability transfers are specific to that particular enrollment plan during that particular snapshot of time. And so the reason that we say that the kindergartners are eligible under the stability transfer rules is because we wanted to be able to get them early transferred. So if you're not aware, our pre-registration or enrollment period actually opens up around October. So those of you that have a kindergartner that might be coming for 26, 27, you could go ahead and get them enrolled, get that active student ID ID number and put in that stability transfer this fall, so you don't have to worry about the regular transfer period later on, and you know your kids are all at the same school and their transfers are all approved. If you've got younger kids that are going to come in future years, 27, 28, 28, 29, and that older student is still going to be attending the school on transfer, then our regular normal transfer rules apply, which do allow us to have kindergartners join their older sibling, and staff is able to approve those. You just will have to wait until the normal March hardship transfer period to do that. But our regular everyday transfer rules will allow you to bring that kindergartner in. You just don't get that early shot because of the impact of the plan. You'll just wait till March to make that request. But yes, staff can approve those.
Thanks, Susan. That's good information.
And I want to pause for a second, Lewis. I know that this is our
Sure.
last session for this round. So if we, if there's a chance that maybe there's some questions for other parts, we can do those questions too. But let's just make sure we get all of our Eastern questions answered first.
Sure. No, that's a good plan. Thank you.
Okay.
So these folks, we appreciate you submitting this question, but they said, hi there, Susan. We apologize. We joined a little bit late. Did you review the Banks/Vance movement? If yes, can I go back and watch the recording later? I wasn't sure what session to join to get that information. Thank you.
Thank you for asking that question. We did not cover that in tonight's session because tonight's is primarily focusing on the Eastern area, but that area was covered in the session that was held on September 9th, and that recording is posted to our website already. So it's the September 9th presentation. I believe it's called the Hilltop Need More Virtual Public Information Session. But if you'll go to, let me find our website. Where's the website, Lewis? Is it this one? Here we go. If you'll go to this website and look for the link to the YouTube recording of the Hilltop Need More session that was held on September 9th, you'll be able to see a deep dive review of that. You can kind of fast forward if you want to get to that part of the session.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Susan, general question about calendar. Why are most elementary schools that are currently opening up on a year-round calendar?
That is a great question, and I have a solid answer. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I talked about the enrollment growth projections, right? And you can see there are still a lot of areas with these dark blue up pointing arrows that are showing a lot of projected and continued enrollment growth. And when you overlay those on top of our elementary crowding map, you can see there are still lots of areas that are already projected just for this school year to have schools that are over 110% or more crowded. In addition, there's a whole crop right behind them in these oranges and yellows that are bumping up at the 100 to 110% crowding or the 90 to 100% crowding. Because elementary schools have a slightly different set of class size rules, you may be familiar, but about 10-ish years ago, the general legislature changed the rules for class size for elementary. It used to be up to the superintendent and the principal's discretion to determine how many students should be accommodated in a kindergarten, first, second, or third classroom. There were general guidelines, but we could decide what fit the needs of our community and our school and our students. The legislature took that away and said that kindergarten has to max out at 18, first grade maxes out at 16, and second and third grade max out at 17 students per class. So because of those restrictions, that 1 year that legislation was approved, we essentially lost 9,000 elementary seats across our district, just like that, because we couldn't fill those classrooms to, let's say, 19 or 20 the way that we used to. We had to restrict and get those class sizes down. So because of the K-3 class size legislation and the rapid growth that's still coming through the district and the limited resources that we have, knowing that there just aren't that many more elementary schools in our capital improvement plan that have been funded and are ready to be constructed, staff feels that the initial recommendation should always be that those elementary schools open as a multi-track year-round, because we can get up to 200 additional seats without spending an extra construction dollar with those schools. The board has made different decisions, and we're making a nuanced revision to that recommendation with Hilltop Need More this year. But last year they did open one elementary school, for this year, I should say, on traditional instead of multi-track. So there's still some discussions that have to be had around it. But from a planning standpoint, we're making the initial recommendation that they open as multi-track year-round to give us those extra seats to manage this enrollment growth.
All right, thank you, Susan.
Mhm.
Susan, can you remind us when there'll be a public hearing to discuss all of this?
Sure. Let me find my timeline slide. So the public hearing is going to be held on October 21st. So that is a board public hearing where you sign up to speak at the public hearing. You will come to the Cary Crossroads facility the night of the board meeting. And then as your name is called, you come up to the microphone and speak. If you watch any of our board meetings live stream, it's that same basic protocol, except it'll be specifically a group of participants who've agreed that they're here specifically for the public hearing. So all of those comments will only be about the assignment plan. And so that's October 21st. It's my understanding that the information about those is posted closer to the day of so that you can sign up and register, but continue to go to our assignment planning website and we'll make sure that there's links there as we get closer to the day. And our community messages that go out from the district will have information about that as well.
Thank you, Susan. Here's another calendar question. It's lacking a little bit of context, but I think you and I will be able to decipher.
Sure.
It says, hi, Lewis. Hi, how are you?
Hey, everyone.
The Mills Park Middle School has a traditional calendar and Salem Middle is on a year-round calendar. This will be an inconvenience for the kids. Has this been discussed with the board?
Yes. In fact, if you'll look at the middle school calendar application slide, that was taken into consideration. So number one, everyone in this situation, so this is a different region for those of you that are watching from the east. This is going to be in the Apex area. Any students that are being proposed to go from Mills Park Middle to Salem Middle have the option to exercise the stability transfer, stay at Mills Park Middle, drive themselves, no transportation. If that is not preferable, or you're thinking about a future student, maybe someone who's not in middle school just yet, recognizing that the board did maintain a traditional calendar option for this area and they matched it to all the other students that attend Salem Middle and right now we're proposing Apex Middle be that traditional calendar option for this area. And that would actually come with transportation. And this is rare. As you'll notice, most of the recommendations we've been making over the last several years are to remove that type of transportation, but recognizing this change and how it's slightly different in this community, maintaining a traditional calendar option has been included in the recommendations. So the two options for the family, if you're an existing student, use the stability transfer, stay at Mills Park, you keep your traditional calendar, you keep your school assignment, you just need to provide your own transportation. If it's for a future student or you're thinking you might need transportation, you would have the option to ask for the traditional Apex.
Okay, thank you again, Susan. So folks, we are still encouraging you to submit your questions. We have a few questions left to answer and we plan on answering those. But we definitely want to encourage folks to continue to post so we can answer as many questions as possible. So Susan, our next question has to do with a staffing question. And it says, will sending school teachers, in other words, teachers who are working at a particular school have an opportunity to apply to schools such as Hilltop need more before other WCPSS staff have the opportunity?
Oh, that's an excellent question. And so if you're a current staff member and you have questions like that, I don't mean to redirect. I'm going to redirect you to your principal because we are partnering behind the scenes with area superintendents, principals, and the human resources department to help make sure we have solid answers to all of those questions. Generally speaking, if you're at a school that's going to be sending students to the new school and the staff is going to need to be reduced a little bit, there are some, I want to say, I don't want to overstretch it, but some sort of early bird options to put in a request and say, hey, rather than be, downsized, I'd be willing to take a spot at the new school. There are some rules about once they identify who the principal is, how many they can take from their current school. So there's a lot of nuance to that answer, and I really don't want to get it wrong and misguide you. So I'm going to encourage you to go back to your principal and then let you know assuredly that we're partnering with area superintendents, human resources, and your principals to make sure you have the most accurate answers to all those questions possible.
Thank you again, Susan. Susan, here's another process question that basically deals with the entire district. It's a good question. For the schools undergoing district boundary adjustments, including those in Apex and in the eastern areas, do we expect that these schools may go through another adjustment in the next year or two?
Year or two, probably not. Our goal, while it's not outlined in policy, in practice, we have really held tight to the idea that if we change an individual address at a particular level, so if we've made an elementary school assignment change for you in the last year or two, we try not to make any more elementary school assignment changes for you for at least 3 years. And that's not terribly comforting, I know, but in high growth areas, sometimes that's the best we can do because there's just such a population boom. And we're trying to get new schools online. We're trying to take advantage of multi-track year round. We're trying to use any space we can in the region to absorb that growth. We're working hard to stretch that window as long as we possibly can. That doesn't mean that if there's an elementary change, there couldn't then be a middle school change a year or two later or a high school change a year or two later. So I do feel that and hear that. And the planning team has been collecting a lot of that kind of feedback recently, that it's a little exhausting to have an elementary change this year and then a middle school change in a couple of years and then a high school change. So the planning team is really trying to figure out a way to maybe do all of those at once, which is kind of what you're seeing in this year's plan. As Hilltop Needmore opens, we've made recommendations for elementary, middle, and high school all at the same time. So it's just done. And we don't have to come back year after year after year to try to make those alignment corrections. So that is something we're working toward. The goal is no more frequently than 3 years. Or I should say the guiding principle is no more frequently than 3 years, but the goal is as long as we possibly can to make an adjustment to your address. Now, a school does as a whole doesn't necessarily have that same stability, if I should say, because if a school is experiencing rapid growth and this group of addresses is used to relieve it on this side, and then maybe a year or two later, that growth continues to pick up and continue to put pressure on that school, and we can identify another solution to reduce that pressure. That's not to say that a different set of addresses might not be impacted or that a calendar change might not be presented. So I don't want it to say that the school wouldn't experience change, but individual address groups would not experience change any more frequently than every 3 years.
Thank you, Susan.
Which is a very complicated answer to what seems like a simple question, and I do apologize for that.
Yes. It's very hard to predict how many homes are coming and how much land's becoming available.
We're doing better than most, but
yes.
And I can do a little bit of a pitch. Wake County is a rare gem, and that we're still growing, and that our public school system is still growing, even though it's not super rapid growth across the whole district, but there are areas of our county that are still flourishing and growing and attracting new families because of the wonderful working conditions, the wonderful sort of living conditions, that work-life balance that can be provided in our communities. It's really a testimony to how amazing our county is. When I go to conferences or have conference calls with thought partners across the country, most are shrinking, trying to figure out how to close schools. They're experience this. So it is a lovely problem to have. And as much as it doesn't feel like a blessing to those that maybe have to have an assignment change, our district is truly blessed to still be in a position of growing and maintaining a high level of market share in our public school district.
Thank you, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Susan, there's some context to this question. The question will be at the end, but I just want to make sure I'm representing this individual's context correctly.
Okay.
We live in the Crooked Creek neighborhood. We are directly adjacent to the new Hilltop Needmore Elementary School site. Mm-hmm. This neighborhood's a Fuquay-Varina community. However, the current plan has our neighborhood squeezed into the bottom of the Middle Creek High School extended boundary, which is in close proximity. However, the overall boundary extends considerably higher up north. Realistically, it's technically part of Cary. Okay. And the current plan is basically taking our Fuquay-Varina kids and taking them out of Fuquay-Varina schools. Now, I understand the rapid growth and the challenge presented, but is there a better approach to this particular area than removing kids from their community?
And I appreciate that. And I pulled up the slide. I did actually have it in the appendix here so we could pull up and look at it. The area that's being referenced is a portion of this area. I'm assuming it's something along the lines of down here, since they're talking about closer to the Willow Spring High School campus. Mm-hmm. Yes, staff absolutely acknowledges that area is closer to Willow Spring High School than Middle Creek High School. However, the challenge that we're facing is Willow Spring High School is rapidly outgrowing its space, and there's continued and nonstop growth in an area where Willow Spring is the only school, right, in the area, if you look at the location of the school. So for families in these regions, there are no other high schools. Middle Creek is the next closest high school. You come up here and there's some couple of Garner schools. You've got to come over here to get to a Fuquay school. So since our district is a county system and not a municipal system, we do understand that families align with their communities, but that's not how we assign students to schools. We don't use municipal boundaries for assigning students to schools. We recognize that may be how you live your life, and I don't want to discount that. But we really do look for the most proximate school with available seats long term. In addition, because this set of recommendations is specifically related to the opening of Hilltop Needmore, it's an effort to make sure that we're hearing and responding to that feedback about that K-12 feeder pattern alignment. Students and families want to make sure that their students have good, strong cohorts to go from 5th to 6th grade with, and then from 8th to 9th grade with. If that area were excluded from the plan, they would literally be the only students going from Hilltop, Needmore, and Westlake, and then on to Willow Spring. It'd be a very small group of students, and they would have that disjointed experience, which everyone has told us is not ideal for success for students. So that's why the recommendation is being made. It's twofold. One, it's to honor that K-12 feeder pattern alignment that families have been desperately asking for, and it's to take advantage of the available capacity in the region. Willow Spring is continuing to grow, and I don't know that we're done, looking at that school. We got to continue to monitor it, because as you can see, these recommendations get them back down to 100, but then they're still continuing to grow. So this Willow Spring is going to continue to need relief in the future. But I get it. We hear it. We're not listening to that comment. We are hearing that. We're evaluating that. But I just want the person to understand why the recommendation was made initially.
Thanks. That's good information, Susan. Thank you. Susan, given that Mills Park Middle, as we all know, has been capped for a very long time, and it's still
longest standing
operating.
cap, I believe.
Yeah, probably 2013, I believe, maybe a year or two, give or take. Given that this school, Mills Park Middle, is still operating at around 110% capacity after this year's adjustment, do you anticipate in the future that boundary changes will need to take place again in the near future?
Short answer is yes. This area might, I'm trying to get to the capital improvement slide. Hang on, let me find that. Is it here? Yeah. So the capital improvement plan for the district includes a new middle school right here, Parkside Middle, and Mills Park is sort of roughly has an attendance area about right here. So yes, we do predict that there'll be additional relief provided to Mills Park Middle when Parkside Middle opens up. That one's not scheduled till about, I might be wrong, so don't misquote me, but I think it's 29-30. So we've got a couple of years. So this initial set of relief will provide some relief for Mills Park Middle, but we do believe that there'll be some more impacts when Parkside Middle opens up. Yes.
Okay, Susan, that concludes the questions that we have for tonight. Folks, I just want to remind you that tonight is not the end of the discussion. The thought exchange will remain open through October 5th. Susan, did you want to say anything final before we close out and just thank folks again for coming?
Yes, thank you all so much. And the questions were really amazing. It was nice and diverse. It was rich. We do appreciate those of you that are joining us for the general information part. We also really appreciate those of you that are tuning in for the Eastern area information. This session has been recorded throughout. We'll make it available as soon as tomorrow. It might be Friday, but sometime before the weekend, the recording will be posted to that same enrollment proposal website that you've been seeing throughout tonight's session. So if you feel like someone could benefit from hearing it live or watching any particular portion, or if you want to rewatch it, I've tried to talk slowly, but sometimes I get going a little quickly. You're welcome to rewatch any portion of the video that you'd like. Again, the open house that we've got scheduled for September 24th is really to help families with services, transition support, and to better know some of the staff at the schools you might be assigned to. I will clarify, Hilltop need more staff have not been identified yet. They won't identify the principal for that school until sometime around December or maybe January. So the staff that'll be there to talk a little bit about what it's like to open a new school. We do have plenty of principals that have done that and area superintendents that have experience with that. If you have questions about how do you start a PTA at a new school, what happens for special education services and the transitions, there'll be a lot of support to answer those kinds of questions at the open house. That is not the public hearing. The public hearing is October 21st, and that'll be held at the boardroom in our Cary office. And with that, I'll give it back to you, Lewis.
Thank you. Susan, thank you for your hard work with this. Thank you to Mr. Spizzato and Ms. Chapman for joining us tonight. And most importantly, thank you, the community, which makes this possible. We appreciate you, and we hope that we were able to answer your questions tonight. But once again, this is not the end of it. You still have opportunity to submit some information that we can consider and use to create and hopefully present to the board before their meeting on the 21st of October. So once again, I just want to share a couple of points before we leave. Once again, we hope this has been informative. We appreciate your honest and open participation. Your input and feedback is vital. I've seen that for many years now to the refinement of the enrollment plan. So please, please, please continue to submit your feedback. The board will meet on October 21st with a final vote expected on November 18th. Remember, once again, the thought exchange where you can continue to enter your comments will be open until October 5th. And we encourage you to continue to post your comments. Everyone is read, they're rated, they're grouped together, and the board takes a look at these. They truly do. So please continue to monitor your email and the district website for information about upcoming events and updates to the FAQ section of the enrollment plan page. Our goal is to keep you informed as we move through this process. Again, I just want to say on behalf of all of us at Wake County Public Schools, especially the Office of Student Assignment, thank you for joining us tonight and enjoy the remainder of your evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.